and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be doing a case review. This is going to be something much better to see than just to hear. So I would encourage you to check out the YouTube for the full video. I've done dozens of these case studies in my functional medicine training courses with over a decade in the trenches, 2,000 cases seen. I have a lot of data. In fact, I'm in the top 10 worldwide with these functional medicine labs in terms of number of labs run. And I say that to tell you I've seen a lot of stuff, a lot of messy cases, a lot of issues that conventional medicine simply has no solution for. And in many cases, I'm working with pediatrics. These are young children that have many health issues that the pediatricians can't help with. And I've been fortunate to be seen by some of them. And these pediatricians then refer their pediatric patients to me, and I take the case on. So we're going to dive into one here called Paloma. This is a 5-year-old little girl, and on the screen here, you'll see the complaints. We like to itemize everything that the parents are telling us. So in her case, it was developmental delay, extremely gassy, emotional stability issues, not understanding social boundaries, skin health. So parents described moderate eczema and chicken skin. So when I see a new client, regardless of age, 1-year-old, 5-year-old, 80-year-old, the same problems happen. Now, the protocol may be different, but the same issues happen. And we have 1-year-old clients that we see, but this is a good one. So let's dive into this little 5-year-old girl and see exactly how to do a proper functional medicine workup, and then what can you do to fix the issues. We'll dive into all of that. So first, we're going to start with the mycotoxin profile. This is something that I think every parent should have done on their children, simply because the world is not getting any less toxic. And if you, during pregnancy, had mold exposure, or even before pregnancy, you had mold exposure, you grew up in a moldy house, or you had a moldy dorm in college, whatever, those mycotoxins go through the placenta, and those end up in the breast milk. So if you plan to have children and you haven't yet and you're watching this, it's important to detox these mold toxins before you get pregnant. The reality is many women have infertility issues due to mycotoxins. We know that citrinin, which is a mycotoxin we'll see here at the bottom of page 3, in her case, she had none, which is great. But in many cases, citrinin is off the charts in people that have infertility. I've been very fortunate to help many women that were told they are infertile, and they were debating going into a $15,000 to $20,000 IVF treatment. And at that point, I mean, it gets controversial, but really, you're doing something you shouldn't. You're forcing a pregnancy when you're not actually fixing the root cause. My bias is towards helping people optimize their health so that fertility improves on its own enough to where you should not need IVF. Now, there may be certain situations where it's just medically impossible without it. I understand. But in many, many cases, as a father of 3 myself, I can tell you that fertility should happen as a byproduct of being healthy. So in her case, you see here, we have a massive mycotoxin problem. This is called ochratoxin. This comes from the mold Aspergillus, and Aspergillus is probably the most common mold that you're going to see in a water-damaged building. So this little girl's 5 years old, and she has levels that are off the chart. So this tells us a couple of things. Either number one, the mother was in a moldy environment during pregnancy, and this was the placental transfer. Number two, this child's being breastfed, and the mycotoxins are coming through the breast milk. Or number three, this child has had her own exposure. Daycare, school, grandparents' house, wherever she's staying, spending a lot of time, apparently she is getting a massive exposure somewhere. And the problem with ochratoxin, well, there's several. And the lab educates us on this, but this is primarily from inhalation in water-damaged buildings. Now, minimal exposure can occur. So like contaminated cereals, grains, juice, dairy, coffee, wine, there is a small percentage of a mold story that has a root in diet. However, it's primarily done through just breathing. You breathe a lot more than you eat, right? You're breathing 20,000 times a day on average. You're only eating a few times a day on average. So inhalation is the biggest one. And we know that this is extremely nephrotoxic. So this damages the kidneys. This is why many children have issues with bedwetting. They may have frequent urination, excessive thirst. This is all likely due to the damage to the kidneys. Also, dopamine levels in the brain are decreased after exposure to ochratoxin. So these are the children that have issues in school. These are the ones that have issues with motivation, getting things done. They get bored easily. They may have addictions to sugar, or if their parents give them a phone, they're addicted to their phone, the screens. Because of the lower dopamine, they're looking for that hit. If you just look into the papers, type in ochratoxin dopamine, you can read that the part of the brain that actually makes dopamine is damaged by ochratoxin. So to me, this is one of the biggest smoking guns facing society and facing our youth, because I test so many children and all of them are elevated in one or more mycotoxins. Many of these kids are spending much more time indoors than they used to. I know me, I was locked outside of my house. Not literally, but I spent sun up to sundown outdoors, meaning even if I had outdoor mold exposure, it was so dilute that it was not a problem. Versus now, no one farms anymore and hardly anyone plays outside. These children are indoors 99% of the time. Therefore, there's much more risk of exposure if they are not in a pristine environment. So this dopamine connection here between ochratoxin and dopamine is massive. And you can come in and use specific amino acids to help improve dopamine levels, but ultimately we have to get the toxin out. There's also a guy named Dr. Dale Bredesen. I plan to do a talk with him, and him and I both do some educational speaking for these labs, and he's now made the connection between Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia to mycotoxins, not just ochratoxin, but multiple mycotoxins. So when you think about your elderly parents, grandparents that are starting to have cognitive issues, a lot of that is tied into heavy metals from mercury fillings, but there's a massive impact from mycotoxins as well. So if your grandmother, parent, etc., is in a moldy environment, they're going to massively increase the risk of developing some sort of neurodegenerative disease, and that is not good. They end up in a nursing home. Who knows if that place is moldy too, and it just worsens the condition. Now, how do you get rid of this stuff? Well, a lot of different things. So glutathione can be helpful to mobilize this ochratoxin. Clay and charcoal can be helpful as a binder. Saccharomyces boulardii. Probiotics are actually very beneficial too, because what happens is we can convert the mycotoxins into something less damaging, and therefore that reduces the risk of kidney issues later in life. I've seen many clients with kidney failure, they all have mold toxin. So that's our mycotoxin profile. This is done with a fasted urine sample. Now we're going to roll into the organic acids test. Now you know that this is my favorite if you've listened to me for any amount of time. Organic acids testing is incredible because you can uncover so much in just one morning urine sample. And this is convenient for kids. We're not poking them and prodding them with needles. Really, blood work would not help us that much in her case. So this is why I love the ability to do at-home functional medicine labs with urine and stool. So this is a combo kit, meaning her cup of pee was run through multiple labs, and that's what we're looking at now, which is the OAT. The OAT really measures the byproducts of the metabolism. So what this means is when you have bacteria, yeast, fungus in the body, they are creating metabolites which then show up in the urine. The best analogy I have right now is think of a bonfire. If you wanted to prove there was a fire, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for ash. You're going to look for a pile of ashes, and you say, oh, look, they must have been burning right here. And so that's how we look at the urine, is we're looking at these downstream metabolites of these upstream problems. So in her case here, we're looking for high markers. So look at number 7 here. This is arabinose. This is the gas that Candida produces. We want less than 56. She's an 82. So we know that mold toxin actually promotes and encourages Candida overgrowth. So if she would have went to a naturopath or some other practitioner beyond me, she likely would have ended up on either a prescription antifungal like nystatin, or maybe if she was with a natural-minded person, she would have done oregano oil or something similar. However, because of my own suffering, I can tell you this with confidence. If you fix these bugs that we see here, they would likely just come back if the mold is not taken out. So you really have to get the mold out of the situation, out of the picture, while you're working on knocking these bugs down. Here's another analogy for that. Think of a nightclub. The mold toxin is like the bad guy at the back of the club. He opens the back door and he lets all these scrubs in. They start tearing things up. So we kick them out, but we didn't shut the back door. The mold's still there. So these bad guys are going to come right back in and tear things up again. So it's kind of a two-fold, two-pronged approach. On the front end, we're knocking these pathogens down out the backside, literally, you're pooping, peeing, etc., excreting these mycotoxins, you're binding them up, and that's what prevents these overgrowth from coming back, unless there's some other major sugar or other problem. So this here called tricarbolic acid, this is tied into Fusarium, and it appears that she's colonized, meaning she apparently is growing Fusarium. We didn't see any Fusarium mycotoxins on the myco, but that could have been a false low report. We definitely need to fix this. DPP, or this beneficial bacteria marker, I don't pay much attention to this. I don't think it's changing her case. But what is important to fix here, especially when we hear things that they're not diagnosed on the autism spectrum, but they have issues with like social cues, for example. That's one thing the mom mentioned. We always see elevated HPA in those children that are on the spectrum. If they have been confirmed or diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, we always see this marker here. And what happens is there's a family of bacteria. These are Clostridia bacteria. You may have heard of C. diff. That's down here, number 17. She doesn't appear to have C. diff, although it's starting to creep up here. But it is some type of Clostridia, and what that does is it actually inhibits an enzyme, and that's called dopamine beta hydroxylase. This is an enzyme that actually breaks down dopamine and converts it into endorphins. However, when this bacteria, Clostridia, is elevated, meaning she has an overgrowth of that Clostridia, which is once again encouraged by mold toxin. Clostridia grows more in the presence of mold. That enzyme gets impaired. You then develop a buildup of dopamine in many cases. We'll look at that in a minute, but this often is associated with autism and major behavioral issues. So these are the kids that are biting and hitting and pinching, and the kids that are acting crazy. The teachers, the parents, they just label these kids as crazy. Maybe they put them on some sort of sedative medication, or maybe like Ritalin or ADHD type medication, but it's not their fault. This is their brain not working properly due to this bacteria. So we need to fix that. Conventional treatment, as you know, for Clostridia and any bacterial issue would typically be antibiotics. As you know, I'm not an MD, so I do not prescribe drugs, and they're just simply unnecessary. We can fix this naturally with herbal antimicrobials. Pyruvic acid, this is likely due to something with the gut. This isn't changing her case too much, though. Mitochondria look okay. You can see number 24 here. This is called succinic acid or succinate. If you look at another organic acid brand, it's starting to creep up here. So the mitochondria will become damaged over time due to mold, and that will create chronic fatigue. Actually, in her case, neurotransmitters look pretty good. You can see things are a little slanted to the left, but not terrible. We do still need to fix that Clostridia problem. Nutrient levels aren't terrible. You can see here she's deficient in B12. This asterisk means it's actually low, so high value equals deficiency. So she is low in B12, so we should fix that. We'll figure out why in a minute. We'll look at the stool test. The B6 is pretty low, B5 a little low. NAC showed 0. Biotin, that's another deficiency. So hair, skin, nails may be affected. Amino acids don't look too good, so digestion's not perfect here. So we're going to close out the oat, and we're going to keep rolling here. I hope you're having fun. This is what I do all day, every day, and then we make protocols to fix these issues. So the GI map, this is a stool test. This is a DNA analysis of the stool, meaning even if there's a small amount of bacteria present, usually we can find that with a stool sample that is done at home and sent back to the lab. So what we're seeing here is the sum of a suppressed immune system due to mycotoxins. We see E. coli thrive in these environments, and that's what she has here. Enterohemorrhagic E. coli. This is no good. We need to fix this. There's another type, enteroinvasive E. coli, also known as Shigella. No good. That shouldn't be there. It's not flagged high, but it shouldn't be there at all. Next page, you see a moderate amount of H. pylori. Now this may grow. Once it's at an E2, usually it grows, and then it becomes an overgrowth problem. That suppresses stomach acid levels. That leads to more nutrient deficiencies. I've seen many children that were diagnosed with failure to thrive. There are issues with they're too thin, they're too small, they're not growing the way they should. Most of those kids have H. pylori, which is a very contagious bacterial infection, likely given from the parents by sharing cups, sharing spoons. Hey, honey, have a drink of my water bottle. My daughter Summer, she had H. pylori when she was 2, and luckily we caught it early and we fixed it. And it's just because I was testing her that I knew about it. You can see the keystone bacteria. These are all of your good guys. These are the good microbes that help you to produce nutrients and help with many other things in the body. You can see she's slanted left on several here, like lactobacillus. We know that gets killed off in the presence of herbicide, so glyphosate, other pesticide, herbicide chemicals. That damages the good microbes. So 100% organic is the goal because that's going to encourage the natural growth of these keystone bacteria. We could use supplemental probiotics in her, though, because we already know that she needs it based on the mold report. Down to page 3, doesn't look terrible. You'll see that there is some staph. It's at an E4, so that's pretty high. This is an exponential scale, so 5.0 E2 is considered normal or less, and then she's an E4, so that's quite high. The candida you see got picked up, but it did not show the true read that it's actually elevated. Candida is so sticky. My assumption is that candida just doesn't get pooped out very often because it's so sticky. I think that we do see false negatives quite a bit on the stool. That's why we run the urine as well. So now we're getting into some trouble here. I don't like what I'm seeing here. We have an occult blood at a 28. This is not normal for anyone, especially not normal for a 5-year-old girl. This is a problem. Something has damaged the colon, likely, possibly the stomach, maybe the small intestine, but there is some microscopic level of bleeding going on here. At this level, you're likely not going to see it in the stool, meaning if you wipe your butt and there's blood, that's likely not what's going to happen at this level. However, this is not good. This is something that's happening internally. We need to fix this, and our plan is with the protocol, we're going to be retesting this in a few months. And I also told them just speak with the pediatrician. They may want to refer to like a pediatric gastroenterologist, potentially look further into this with some sort of scope just to see what's going on. But this is no good. I've seen this many, many times. I've seen it resolve every single time, though, which is great. We've never had an issue, even with colonoscopies, endoscopies. We've never seen polyps or cancer or anything like that. Generally, this is a functional problem, meaning the bacteria, the Shigella, something in the gut that's overgrowing has damaged it to cause this microscopic bleeding. H. pylori, we've seen do that too, and we've been able to resolve this. Next time we test it, fingers crossed, it should be like every other kid we fixed where the level is nothing, 0. You can see that the immune system, IgA, secretory IgA, this marker will be thrown off. So this could be chronically elevated or this could be chronically suppressed, just depending on the unique situation. In her case, the IgA is showing very high. So the immune system is dysregulated based on the mold. The bacteria will do this somewhat also. This girl is very, very sensitive to gluten. She needs to be off of gluten completely. You can see here there's a marker called anti-gliadin IgA. This is almost double the normal range here. These are gluten antibodies. So this tells me, I call this the gluten lie detector test. This tells me she's been eating gluten and she has a major problem sensitivity to it and she should not be doing it. This eosinophil activation protein, this is always going to be high when there's a lot of infection going on. This is just another sign that the immune system is not right. Down here, this is scary high. Calprotectin, this is a well-known, even in the conventional gastroenterology world, this is a well-known biomarker for intestinal inflammation. Ideally, we'd like to see it in the single digits, maybe double digits, but still in the green. You can see here, she is a 2673. That's 2,673, less than 173 is what the lab recommends. She is well beyond that. I mean, this almost makes you think potential celiac, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. We've got the perfect storm here. We have infections, we have toxins, we have immune system dysregulation, massive inflammation, intestinal bleeding. This is no good. So this is definitely a case where we're wanting the conventional medical docs to come in and help us to investigate, make sure there's not some sort of autoimmune gut disease happening. This is just a perfect recipe for that. So quite a mess. This is a toxic chemical profile. There are 80,000 plus chemicals in the environment. Every kid is toxic. I did a video on my Instagram page that went pretty viral about kids being toxic. I think it went viral because it said kids are so toxic on the thumbnail, and people probably think emotionally toxic, but I'm talking chemical toxic, and this is a big problem. Now, everyone has something from the environment, like what we're looking at here on the top are gasoline additives. This comes from car exhaust fumes. Almost everyone is in the yellow or the orange, but we're really concerned about things above 95th percentile. So we're going to just scroll through this and see what we find. Ethylbenzene, styrene chemical, this is more car exhaust fumes. It's elevated but not off the chart. A lot of these are non-detected, which is great. We get into some plastic chemicals that are elevated but not sky high. Then we get down here to number 15. This is called diethylphosphate. The parent chemical is organophosphates. These are very toxic pesticides. And we know that the children that are exposed to pesticides, like in a farm setting, like living next to farms, and or the mother eating conventional food, or the children eating chemically sprayed food, we know that children exposed to those organophosphates have more than twice the risk of developing what's called pervasive developmental disorder, which is an autism spectrum disorder. We also know that maternal exposure also affects the pregnancy. So shorter pregnancies, these are women going into labor early. You hear about that so commonly now. Oh, surprise, the baby came early. People think that that is normal. Just because something is common nowadays does not make it normal. This is a big problem. This creates aggression, depression, autism, and many other cognitive and behavioral problems. She needs to be less than a 0.6. The 95th percentile is a 16, and she is a 92. So that is well above. That's like 99.9% percentile. And what that means is, let's say you take 1,000 kids and you test all of them. If you're at the 95th percentile at a 16 of this chemical, let's say you're at a 17, that means you're in the top 4% of toxicity, which is a terrible place to be. The 2,4-D, which is part of Agent Orange, that was a chemical they used in Vietnam to defoliate the trees so that they could see the Vietnamese people from above. That is a nasty chemical that we still to this day use in agriculture. And conventional agriculture, like GMO foods, for example, are very heavily sprayed. And this can cause, in the acute stage, dizziness and headache and abdominal pain, nausea, weakness, even seizures. This is a known endocrine disruptor, so this creates a lot of issues with fertility and hormonal dysfunction. She's not 95th percentile, but it is elevated. Acrolein, this is also a big problem. In her case, it's not off the chart, but it's probably from the Clostridia in the gut. So this is how we look at a case. We just look at the total sum of infection. We try to measure with urine and stool, what are we up against? Let's get the puzzle pieces laid out in front of us, and then we make a protocol to fix her. So I will report back once we have updated labs on her to show just how far we've come. But in her case, what we're doing is the following. We are doing herbal antimicrobials in liquid form. We're doing binders, which are opened up. Their capsules opened up, put in like a little bit of juice, and then those are being taken at night before bed to bind up to the mycotoxins. The blend we're using for the bugs is antifungal, antimicrobial. That is also going to help with inflammation. So when you kill the infections driving the inflammation drops on its own. Just because the inflammation level is so high, though, we are using a formula that I have called GI Soothe, which is a blend of calming, clinically proven leaky gut sealers, if you will. This is chamomile, zinc carnosine, glutamine, other nutrients to help soothe and repair the gut lining and reduce inflammation. We're also using some liver and adrenal support because of the stress that she's under to kill these things. She needs the support for the liver, for the adrenals. This is helping with drainage. This is helping her pee, helping her poop. There's some kidney support herbs built into this protocol also. We're using methylated multivitamin to help. We're using probiotics, including Saccharomyces boulardii, to help bind up to the mycotoxins. Probiotics are also going to help reduce inflammation. And then, of course, looking into the mom. Hey, what else is happening in the house? Are there mycotoxins in her bedroom? Do we need to look at replacing the carpet? Are there issues in the walls? Are there issues at school or daycare? So you have to look at this whole picture. You can't just look at the labs or the person. You really have to consider the environment that they're in. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown of looking at these functional medicine labs. This is something that you can do on yourself. If you want help, if you want to work one-on-one clinically, I do still offer that. I also have another functional medicine provider on my team, and we work around the world with people. We've been fortunate to help so many that had no hope, that had no choice but to seek someone out like us. And finally, we help them get to the bottom of it, whether it's fertility, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, etc., skin issues, autoimmunity. We've been able to help and reverse so many issues that it's a true blessing to be able to help people. And really, it's only because of my own suffering. I never would have figured out this mold, bacteria, candida connection until I got sick. And we had new construction. We had water we didn't know about. And water damaged buildings are no joke. I had dizziness. I had heart palpitations. I had many issues. My daughter wasn't feeling good. My wife wasn't feeling good. It was a mess, but luckily we've been able to pull out of that, and now we help and teach others. And if you don't want one-on-one consultations, you don't need your handheld, but you're a do-it-yourself person, you want to learn more, well, check out my functional medicine courses. I have over 800 students in these, many of them, which is really cool. Maybe 20% of those now are practitioners, medical doctors, gastroenterologists, and those people then hire me to do consultations to help their patients, which I love. So we are seeing a big interest from the conventional medical community into these type of tests, into these type of protocols. And the other 80% are people like you, health seekers, stay-at-home moms, yoga teachers, nutritionists, organic gardeners, farmers, people that just want to improve their health. They're taking the course, they're going through case studies just like I showed you today. They're running through the protocols that we're using, implementing those themselves, and they're making massive recoveries. So true healing is possible if you get the correct data. Do not stop at just nutrition. You don't have to tweak the diet anymore. I guarantee you, once you get optimized, once you get clean with your diet, leave it alone and move on. Get the functional data. So many people obsess about every little tiny piece of nutrition. And as a credentialed functional nutritional therapy practitioner, that was my original credential, and now I have the certified functional medicine provider practitioner credential. I will tell you straight up, I saw what nutrition can do, and there's a lot that it can't do. Nutrition can't eliminate those mycotoxins. Nutrition can't kill those bacteria. You do need interventional tools at a certain point. You can't eat your way out of every problem, although it can massively improve your case. So keep that in mind. Thanks for tuning in. I would love to see your review on the Apple Podcast app, so please leave a review. I appreciate you greatly, and I will talk to you in the next one. Take care.